Exactly a year ago, from the ramparts of the Red Fort, Prime Minister Modi delivered his maiden Independence Day address and coined slogans that captured the imagination of the country and formed the bedrock of this government's policy drive. 365 days later, the Prime Minister today took stock. No game-changing reforms in his over 90-minute address. Is this a government in implementation mode or a government that's short of ideas after 15 months in office? Hello and welcome to this Independence Day special telecast. I'm Sandeep, Gurumurthi, and we're joined by a stellar lineup of experts to analyse all that the Prime Minister said and all that he didn't. We've got Vinayak Chatterjee, Gurcharan, Sidharth Birla, Dilip, Padgaonkar and Rajiv Kumar to analyse all of that and more right here on ET Now. I'm going to start with you, Dilip Padgaonkar. I hope to get some straight answers, and I hope I'm not going to get some politically correct answers. Dilip Padgaonkar, I have to start with you. Was this a speech that was short of ideas, according to you?
Well, it was clear to me right from the beginning that the speech was crafted in order to dispel the fairly negative perceptions about this government that have accumulated in the past 15 months. And those perceptions were of two kinds. One, that this was a government which has been struck by policy paralysis, that it's not made much of a headway in any of the pledges that Mr. Modi made during the election campaign, as well as the fact that the government is perceived to be pro-business, anti-labor, anti-farmer, and so on and so forth. So a bulk of that 90-minute speech, if you take a look at it, was really devoted partly to convey the message that the various schemes launched by the government have made a headway, partly also to say that on the economic front, much headway has been made also to curb corruption, to bring back black money. But, on the other hand, there wasn't really a word on what was expected of the Prime Minister, namely what he intended to do in order to speed up economic reforms that are direly needed in order to stimulate growth. There was not a word, for example, on the GST, on what he intends to do about the land acquisition bill, and so on and so forth. A great deal of attention, media attention, has been concentrated on this one rank, one pension business. And here, let me tell you that on this issue, the Prime Minister did take what I thought was an extremely reasonable and wise stand. The government has accepted OROP in principle, but it's going to need time because of the complexity of this issue in order to finally come up with a date for implementing it. So overall, I think that the speech was crafted to dispel negative perceptions, and whether or not the Prime Minister succeeded is something that I'm quite prepared to discuss in some detail later.
Sure, we'll get to each of those points that you raised. But Sidharth Birla, do you agree with Mr. Padgaonkar's assessment that he's missed out on a lot of crucial economic issues that people sought clarity on? We at ET Now obviously want the Prime Minister to talk about GST, to talk about land acquisition bill. Disappointed that didn't find a mention in his speech, or do you think this probably wasn't the right forum for him to address these issues?
Well, on the analysis, I largely agree with Dilip ji. Let's first understand that he was addressing a national audience, starting from children to ladies to grown-ups. And this was not a business event that he would actually cover economic policy in detail. Secondly, I believe that given the political situation right now with either some oncoming elections or the parliamentary session that has just ended, I would not have imagined that the Prime Minister would actually play out his hand and say, this is what I'm going to do next. I think we've all discussed ad nauseum that land bill and GST are very important. I think everybody in the country has understood it. So I think his speech was carefully crafted as to what it wanted to say, as well as what he did not want to say. And that's the way I look at it.
Sure.
And yes, there were some gaps in the sense that one would have expected to hear more. But I think he was very clear that I want to say this much and no more.
All right, we'll talk about the things that he didn't speak about as well. Gurcharan Das, how do you read the Prime Minister's speech? Do you think it was more of a report card of all that's been done over the last 15 months and a speech that was probably short of ideas?
Well, I'm glad that the Prime Minister resisted the temptation to announce lots of new schemes and, in fact, did give us a partial report card of the existing schemes that have been announced, the vast number of schemes that have been announced. Now, the fact is that Modi was elected for three reasons. He was elected to control inflation, to stop corruption, and to create jobs. Now, he has been able to succeed with the first two. The inflation has come under control, but he's been lucky there. There's been no major corruption scandal from Delhi in the last 15 months. And the deficit is really in creating jobs. And this is where I felt that the report card he gave was weak. It was weak because he did not talk about the ways that he had promised to create jobs. He did not talk about the ease of doing business. What were the initiatives that were succeeding? Now, most of these initiatives are in the states, but it is he who promised to prod the states and to achieve a much higher rank in the ease of doing business than we have today. So I frankly was the only part when he talked about jobs was again a slogan that he presented, which was about giving loans to entrepreneurs, and it was about startup, stand up, that slogan, where these even Dalit entrepreneurs, etc., would get loans. But again, what we are missing from Mr. Modi is a roadmap, is implementation. Now, there is some implementation going on, but we want to hear about it. In the same way, on Swachh Bharat, you know, he made a wonderful story about how a child stops his parent from throwing things out the window. But what we wanted to know was how the municipalities and panchayats are managing solid waste.
Sure.
That's going to make a difference to Swachh Bharat.
Right. So
I think all in all, there are achievements. There are achievements. JAM is our biggest achievement to date.
Sure.
And for JAM, Jan Dhan Yojana, Aadhaar, mobile banking, I think he deserves a huge amount of credit.
Sure. So implementation, just to interrupt you there, you're saying implementation is the key, and I have a lot of questions on that front as well, but I want to get in some of my other panelists as well. Rajiv Kumar, do you agree with the view there of Gurcharan Das that at the end of the day, there's nothing wrong in the fact that he didn't roll out new schemes and that this was more of a report card of the last 15 months? Did the speech seem more like that, more of a report card of what's happened over the last 15 months?
Well, it's a report card, of course, and I think we should expect it because everybody was, everybody would have otherwise said that he's not, he's not being accountable. But also, it's a rather selective report card because he talked a great deal about the very successful financial inclusion schemes that he's launched, the Jan Dhan and the Pradhan Mantri Bima Yojana, etc., and also about the sort of the farmers, the agriculture, and the LPG gas subsidy, the direct transfer, and so on. But there were a large number of schemes announced last year in his speech. So, for example, there is no mention of Make in India or Digital India or several others. But so therefore, I think what he has done is to tell the country, the nation, the sort of success he's achieved, and he's, I think, reserved those where the work is in progress to come back to them later. But to not expect a report card in the second year, and for if he had actually chosen to just talk more about the future and a long-term vision, etc., people would have would have charged him by being airy-fairy and not being accountable. So I think he's done a good balance of the two.
Okay, good balance of the two. Vinayak Chatterjee, I'm going to let you have the last word in this first round of questions before we get down to the specifics of what he said. Sum it up for us. What do you think are the three key hits and the three key misses from the Prime Minister's address? Quickly.
I think the Prime Minister has once again proved that he is an excellent communicator and understands audience connect. As Sidharth Birla said a little while ago, and I completely agree with him, he is addressing the nation from the ramparts of Red Fort. He is addressing farmers who are sitting under trees listening to the radio or in front of old black and white TV sets in remote parts of the country. And this is the audience that, as Prime Minister, he would like to connect on Independence Day. And if you ask me, there are a few things he's done which I think once again shows him as a very effective communicator to the average Indian. Look at he has used very simple language, very easy to understand language on jobs, toilets, cleanliness, bank facilities, gas cylinders, farmers' welfare, Mehngai. I was hard pressed to find any jargon or economic phrases or or words which the common man would not be able to relate to. So here the speech has been very well crafted to address the commonest of the common people listening to his speech. That's the first point I'd like to make. So he's got his communication strategy fine-tuned with the audience in mind. He's not addressing an NRI audience in New York, nor is he addressing FICCI or CII or Chambers of Commerce, nor is he addressing the middle class, so he's addressing vast amount of the Indian population. He's got his messaging and his tonal qualities right. He has drawn links between last year and this year, whether it is in electrification of rural villages or moving ahead with some of the campaigns. He's spoken about it. A very important, I think the number of times he's used these two words, Team India, Team India, Team India. He's trying to send a very, very strong message to even the political class that we should rise above disruptive factional politics and do something good for the country. This is the first time I've heard him use Team India as many times in a speech. I don't think I've heard that before. It's a very strong message he's sending. He has spoken about corruption, but there is a very hidden message there. He has very interestingly used the language that not a single allegation has been made about corruption in the central government. Now remember, he has not said the same thing about state governments, and he has given reasonable hints to say that like Dimak, it is all over the countryside, and the fact that the central government has made a statement about a zero incidence of any allegations of corruption, he expects that wave to sweep over now into states and districts. Very important messaging. And of course, a very important messaging on job creation. He neither said that the government is going to create jobs in the railways or in the PSUs, nor did he say anything about private sector creating jobs. In a sense, he's taken a completely new path of saying, I'd like entrepreneurial activity from the grassroots level to be the engine of job creation. It's a very interesting message for economic India, also for the banks, also for people who provide finance and various other linkages. So let me stop here, because I also have a list of points about the things he did not mention, but a lot of speakers before me have mentioned that. So let me stop here and allow you to get on with the panel discussion.
Sure, we'll come to those misses as well, but I want Dilip Padgaonkar to comment on one of the points that he made, which is on him reaching out to the political class and this whole talk of Team India, because a lot of people are highlighting that as one of the key hits of this speech. But Mr. Padgaonkar, the actions of the government over the last 15 months, do they stand testimony to his talk and to his rhetoric, the way they've handled the opposition in the floor of the parliament, the inability to reach out to some of the opposition parties? Is that in sync with what he's saying?
Well, first of all, about Mr. Modi's oratorial skills, there can't be two opinions. He's a first-rate communicator. There is, however, a problem with his communication strategy. He's, of course, spoke time and again about Team India. The impression he's conveyed is that he is the captain of that team, and therefore that he rises above the fray of the fractious political class in the country and against a media which hasn't been tender towards him, and therefore he wishes to go over their heads and address the people at large. The problem with this strategy is that the address to the nation is a great occasion for him to say what he wants to say, but then it would have been effective also had he used those oratorial skills in Parliament. His presence in Parliament, which was absolutely necessary during this terrible session that we witnessed, was next to nil. And that is the forum which he could have chosen in order to make many of the points that he made in his address from the Red Fort. Secondly, there is an even graver problem with this communication strategy, is that this is a one-way communication. There is absolutely no space available for people to raise doubts about what he says, to interrogate him on specific points, to voice their dissent. It is a one-way communication strategy. Now, how long can this be sustained? Because at some point or the other, it's the credibility of the strategy which is going to be in question. But that is the way he is. That is the way he was as Chief Minister of Gujarat. That is the same kind of communication strategy that he has been practicing ever since he became Prime Minister. We'll have to see how far that message has really gone. But I would say that he's given a fairly balanced, I think, list of what he's achieved. Maybe he ought to have also been a little more contrite about what he's not been able to do. For example, on this question of zero of his government not having a single stain of corruption. That is a bit problematic because the entire session in Parliament really was based on an issue of corruption. There's not a word that he said about it.
Fair enough.
There are several other such things which, once you go down into the fine print of what he said, you'd see, so what was required really is at some stage or the other, the Prime Minister has to be accountable to the people. They would be accounted to Parliament, accountable perhaps also to the media.
Sure.
But that's not what he seems
That's a separate debate in itself, Mr. Padgaonkar, the point that you made about why the session was washed out. But now I want to get to some of the specifics that he's raised in the Independence Day speech. From our point of view, one of the interesting things was to link fiscal incentives to employment. Sidharth Birla, comment on that. Is this a game-changing move? He coined that fancy term, come make in India, and yet 1 year later, with the exception of Foxconn, which is announced an intent to invest, we haven't seen any big-ticket investments. How do you read this move to link fiscal incentives to employment generation?
I think it was innovative. It is necessary. I wouldn't call it a game changer. I would say it's necessary to generate livelihoods and to link fresh investment with livelihoods, because one of the problems is that particularly, even if Foxconn comes and very big manufacturing comes into India, if and when, the large companies are going to provide limited employment. Because they are more capital intensive and less labor intensive. So I think he needs to push labor intensiveness into manufacturing. And how do you bring that about unless you give some special incentives for creating jobs and livelihoods? So I think that was a very important and perhaps overdue move, because from, let's say when I was President FICCI, we were trying to find out ways as to how could we balance capital intensity with labor intensity. We needed to balance them. We didn't need to push any of them out of the window. So I think that was interesting.
Right.
What I found the Prime Minister missing maybe on the financial side, I think this government has done particularly well on controlling inflation.
Mr. Birla, just to interrupt, I want to get to the misses in just a bit, but I want to get a comment from Vinayak Chatterjee on what you said on this move to link fiscal incentives to employment. Vinayak Chatterjee, is it not restrictive at a time when it's very clear that the government wants to take away exemptions from industry? It's cut corporate tax rate or announced a roadmap to cut corporate tax rate in the last budget. So it wants to take away incentives. So at a time, if you're going to tell industry that I'm going to link your fiscal incentives to the amount of employment that you generate, is that not restrictive for industry?
I'm sorry to tell you, but in your interview, I think you're straying far away from the discussion about the Prime Minister's speech from the ramparts of Red Fort today. So with your permission, while we can handle your question in the days ahead, I would rather restrict my comments to saying that in terms of answering your point on misses, I have seen in today's speech a whole bundle of economic issues which he has chosen not to speak about. This relates, for example, to private sector's role in capital investments and job creation. There's no mention. On various issues of infrastructure targets which were a big issue in the election time or even last year, which is high-speed rail, bullet train, smart city, 24/7 electricity, water, river linking. A whole lot of these issues did not find mention. The issues of GST, land did not find mention. The devolution of more power to states fiscally and otherwise did not find mention. So if you really, in a sense, look at it from different angles, today's Red Fort speech actually very consciously stayed away from a lot of economic issues, which, if I were to relate it to Dr. Manmohan Singh speaking from the ramparts of the Red Fort, would have been peppered with far more economic stuff than the Prime Minister chose to do so today. Now, whether he did so willingly as a strategy to not focus on many of these issues, which could be seen as part delivery, full delivery or non-delivery, or because he felt that these were, shall we say, too esoteric for the common Indian to relate to their daily lives, is something we can debate about. But let me rest my case.
Gurcharan Das, which part of the debate are you on? Sidharth Birla believes that he was addressing the nation at large, so probably unfair to expect him to address some of these crucial economic issues. But I agree with Vinayak there that probably some of these issues which are of critical national importance, like the GST, should have found a mention, especially since there is this political logjam. What's your view, Gurcharan Das?
Well, yes, I think that, look, he, as I said earlier, he was elected to create jobs. The country needs to create 1 million jobs a month. Everybody in India understands that. There's nothing esoteric about the fact that about this if you are unemployed. So this was a point that needed to be squarely addressed today, and I personally was disappointed because, frankly, even though let's give credit to the ordinary viewer, even that poor farmer who's listening to this on the radio. The fact is that you get jobs when you get growth, and he squarely needed to manage expectations. Expectations were too high when he came in for jobs. He did not manage those expectations well, and this was an opportunity to tell people that it takes time. When you're coming out of a trough, it takes time for the economy to pick up, and growth is what brings jobs. And it's not only manufacturing that brings jobs, but services, all kinds of jobs here. We should not undervalue jobs in other sectors. And to me, if you ask me, a lot of people, they are asking, look, I'm unemployed. You said that I would be employed by now. And you've got to explain to the person, and it's not a difficult message. You don't have to confuse people with economic and macroeconomic terms. You can give this message where you can link growth to jobs. We've got certain connections. About a 1% growth creates 15 lakh jobs. Each direct job creates 3 indirect jobs. So you've got 60 lakh jobs. Plus it supports 5 people. That's 3 crore people are helped by 1% growth. Now that's the simple message which you need to take to the masses, and you need to tell people that this is what I am doing, and I've controlled inflation, I've controlled corruption, but now this is what I am doing.
Dilip, Padgaonkar, comment on that. You believe, while we all know what a brilliant communicator the Prime Minister is, do you think the messaging could have been slightly different this time around after 15 months of being in office?
Well, at least 2 or 3 messages ought to have been communicated in a clear manner. For example, he's spoken in the past about connectivity. Here there was just one reference in his speech to connectivity when he said, those villages which do not have power, do not have electricity, we will ensure that this is done as swiftly as possible. But earlier in the program, one of the panelists spoke about the Foxconn coming and investing here. That factory is going to be set up roughly 10 kilometers from where I'm speaking to you here in Pune. And obviously the Punekars are thrilled that this investment is coming. There'll be at least 50,000 jobs available. But at the same time, many of them are saying, look at the state of our roads, the traffic snarls, the garbage heaps. Look at the fact that for at least 15 years, there have been various studies made to say that Pune desperately needs another airport for both internal travel, domestic travel and international travel. And nothing is happening because the political class is unable to make up its mind, the bureaucracy is unable to deliver, and so on and so forth. So the simple message was to take a look at the big picture. The big picture is job creation, education, health, all these are intrinsically linked, and therefore one cannot be at the cost of the other. Now Mr. Modi has that in mind. It's not as if he doesn't, but I wonder why he couldn't spell this out. And the earlier thing, which I agree with the panelists who said, that saying that we are going to give you a separate package if you're in the manufacturing sector and you produce more and more jobs. Now this again is something that goes against all kinds of logic. What you require are incentives which will help all stakeholders. And here again, I had hoped that the government would explore various alternatives that have been successful, let us say, of farmers pooling their resources together, starting their own company, developing their own land, and so on and so forth. So it's not as if we don't have alternatives, but none of this seems to have figured in the Prime Minister's speech today. And therefore, I think in terms purely of new ideas, not new projects, but in terms of new ideas regarding especially implementation, I thought it was a somewhat disappointing speech.
We'll get to the ratings later on in this show, but I want to get back to some of the issues that he did talk about. Sidharth Birla rationalizing 44 labour laws that did find a mention. I know that corporate India has been crying for some sort of a labour reform. How do you read that move? How much of a booster is that going to be for India Inc.?
The past 50.
Well, I don't have the specifics of what they are going to do, but I think basically what India Inc.
That's the way it works with this government, I'm guessing.
Is overall employment is protected. Sorry, I missed you.
No, please carry on. Please carry on.
What India Inc. really looks at is, we would like the total employment to be protected rather than protect individual jobs. And ultimately, those kind of policies are what is going to lead to higher productivity. And so, India Inc. doesn't really need hire and fire, but you need to generate productivity, you need to generate output at a particular cost. And so we are looking at enabling features in the law and the changes to be made in law, which can protect overall employment, at the same time allow the companies to boost their productivity and make the best use of labor. And as well as have an equitable labor law which protects the interest of the labor, the overall interest of the labor, as well as the overall interest of the corporates. So I mean, that's one of the issues which he had touched on.
So, Rajiv Kumar, rationalizing.
And secondly, I would just like to mention that at the end, he again did come back to manufacturing. Given the fact that the last Independence Day was the launch of the Make in India initiative. That means manufacturing as a job creator or a livelihood creator in the country still continues to be occupy a very important position, and India's real salvation in the long term is going to be manufacturing. So he ended the speech on the manufacturing bit, and I think he spoke a few words about it, so it's very much on the agenda.
Rajiv Kumar, rationalizing 44 labor laws, does that count as labor reform according to you?
I'm sure it does, because it is the plethora of these laws which leads to the inspector Raj and to in fact the tyranny of the legal process and the tyranny of the inspector, because all of those innumerable laws are not implemented. They are only meant for generating rent and buying off the people who implement the law. So if you rationalize, I have been making this recommendation for a long time in my chapter that I did, and the book that he has actually on manufacturing. This was one of my key recommendations, and this has been the World Bank's recommendations as well. So I'm very happy. It's a major reform of the labor market, because what you and the other major reform of the labor market is this greater attention on the unorganized sector. Because you cannot continue with the practices, the work practices, and the etc. that you got in the unorganized sector now. So I think it does constitute a labor reform, though not in the same not in the same genre as people saying you do away with the restriction on hire and fire, etc., which I've always believed is not practical for India. So this is an India-suited forward movement, significant forward movement to rationalize the labor market, and I think it will therefore show results quite quickly.
Vinayak Chatterjee, how do you read this move, and is it also probably naive to now expect the government to move on labor reforms after what it has done on land? We saw the government move boldly on the land acquisition bill and then now take a few steps back back to square one. So given the whole political climate, is it going to be tough for even this government with 282 seats to move on both land and labor reforms, which are so critical?
Well, they're certainly trying to, and one of the political processes is that they're encouraging states, like Rajasthan has anyway moved a labor legislation at the state level, which is a shade better than what existed till date. Now, whether on land, whether on labor, one of the new political dynamics that I'm watching is the center actually encouraging states to say, look, if you are reform-minded, if you are forward-looking, we're going to support you, so get on with it. So this new spirit of the center encouraging competitive, shall we say, federalism or competitive development is a good idea. So if there's going to be huge political logjams with different political parties playing political games in parliament, it's nice to encourage the states to say, you send your land bill, and if it meets the broad principles of what we want enunciated, we will give the presidential assent. Go ahead with labor reforms. I think it's a good idea. But, hearing your questions and all the panelists, each of us can have a laundry list of all the items we think the Prime Minister should have said on Independence Day speech. Now, it's impossible for him to cover every button you want him to press. He is the Prime Minister. I am sure between him, his political advisors and his officers in the PMO, they would have spent hours poring over the communication package and the strategy. And if you ask me, that he has obviously chosen to say a few things and he has chosen not to mention a few things, which I suspect he will mention in different fora in the weeks and months to come. But if you ask the single important question, do you think today from the ramparts of the Red Fort he connected with the average Indian? I think the answer is yes. And I think that is at the end of the day what makes for a good Independence Day speech.
But what will make for a good debate, Mr. Chatterjee, is a heated exchange of views on what he said and what he didn't say, which is what we are trying to get at. Gurcharan Das, I want to get you in on one of the points that both Mr. Vinayak Chatterjee made and Sidharth Birla made as well, which is, this whole the steps that the government has taken, which he highlighted as well. But, if you saw his comments on the black money issue when he said that, we need to take a tough medicine and that there could be side effects and that you can't expect the administration to be, overtly friendly. This at a time when, and I'm not talking about black money specifically, but a time when a lot of sections of foreign investors believe that the tax department continues to be adversarial. How does one read his commentary on the side effects, so to say?
Yes, well, I too winced a little bit at that point. I think overall he managed it reasonably well. But I think he missed an opportunity. He missed an opportunity. He said a lot of, I'm so glad that he took credit, and rightfully so, credit for the achievement of the JAM achievement, the bank accounts, the Aadhaar, the bank insurance, etc. It would have been a very good opportunity for him to have actually told give a little people a reassurance about the market, that being pro-market is not being pro-business. That's the unfortunate paradigm that exists today, and that's why Congress has allowed has been able to hijack his agenda by making the land bill pro-business versus pro-farmer. And this was an opportunity again he speaks brilliantly in his way to explain to people that actually pro-market is the opposite of being pro-business, because businessmen like to have monopolies and pro-market takes the power away from them. And therefore, what he could have done, and his talk about black money, etc., was not to paint business in black terms, but what he could have done was to explain how the competitive market helps us all in improving quality of our products, in keeping our costs low, and other benefits that the average person derives. Now, no Prime Minister has dared to talk about this. We've all followed that Nehruvian paradigm up to now, and I feel he's still defensive about this. And this country has to come out and say we are no longer a socialist economy. And every opportunity, whether it's Mann Ki Baat or Independence Day, this is the sort of message that needs to go to the people, that even a farmer is benefited from the market.
Right. Dilip, Padgaonkar, that's a big conflict, and that's what surprised many of us. The fact that everyone knows of Modi to be someone who is pro-market, not necessarily pro-business, but some of his actions over the last 15 months don't necessarily justify that. In a sense, do you believe now that the Congress has managed to box him into a corner of being seen as pro-business, which is why he's trying to go out of his way to justify his government as pro-poor?
Well, mind you, of course, as I said right at the beginning, he's tried very hard. He's crafted his speech to get rid of these negative perceptions. But let me tell you about a couple of things in the speech which impressed me and which tell me that to be seen to be pro-poor does not necessarily mean to indulge in populism. And I think this speech was, to a large extent, free of a populist stance. The two things that impressed me, one was when he spoke about the auctioning of coal and spectrum, and the figures that he gave there. I mean, that was a very, very clear message of how this government is different from the previous one. The other, which to me is even more important, might sound a bit trivial to a lot of people, but when he said that he wanted to do away with interviews of candidates for various low-level jobs. I think this is a remarkable thing. And any time a peon is to be recruited, an employee in the railway has to be recruited and so on, it is at the interview stage that a huge amount of all kinds of nefarious deals and activities take place. Now, if this one thing is brought in the picture, that you just say no to an interview, that there'll be only an online processing system of applications, this is something that's going to go a long way to bring about a greater degree of transparency in the manner in which these things are done. And I think, but let me not exaggerate, I think that was done also in the background of the huge Vyapam scam where many of these things took place. And secondly, also that it gives the sense that the administration is accountable. And this again is to be related, to something which has been saying, which he did not repeat in this speech, which is less government, more governance. And I think these are some of the steps which I see we are moving in that direction.
Sure. Sidharth Birla, you want to comment on what Mr. Padgaonkar and Mr. Gurcharan Das had to say on this government's efforts to be seen as pro-business, pro-market, pro-poor? Are they a little confused here?
No, I think, as I said, that the Prime Minister, in my opinion, was conveying exactly what he wanted to convey to a mass audience. That does not take away from the fact that the government has continuously articulated that there is no contradiction in being simultaneously pro-business and pro-poor, which effectively means a market-led kind of approach. And I think if we need to create livelihood in this country, if we need to create jobs, it's not just business. Business doesn't mean just large business. There might be 100 big corporates, but there have to be 1 million small and medium units. For everyone large company who invests 5,000 crores, you need 5,000 companies investing 1 crore. Without which the economy will not move forward. So I think the government's policy is very clear that they see no contradiction in looking after all constituencies. What he chooses to say in a mass communication does not, in my opinion, distort that policy.
Sure. Rajiv Kumar, for a government that has been labelled by its opposition as anti-farmer, renaming the Agriculture Ministry as Farmers Welfare Ministry, how do you read that? Is that just a cosmetic, symbolic move according to you?
Well, I am not a great believer in renaming ministries and institutions, etc., because I think that's just a nameplate, and I think that's more symbolic, and that's probably been done to more as a electioneering prop for the coming Bihar elections. And overall, I think he has focused on the farmers this time much more than the last time for 2 reasons. One, that they were absent in the last speech, and therefore there was a criticism of that. And 2, that he, because of what's happened in the land acquisition, etc., he wants to take away the agenda of a campaign against him as being anti-farmer. So I think the focus on the farmer, the focus about getting electricity to 18,000 villages which don't even have a electric pylon at the moment, and the fertilizer, the urea, the neem coating of the fertilizer, are all steps in the right direction. So I think and by the way, his focus also on the yield and productivity in agriculture, and the 50,000 crore which have been allocated to the Prime Minister's irrigation scheme, I think are all well taken, because it's high time that Indian agriculture was given the attention that is due. And finally is the emphasis on the eastern states, because they are the ones where the second green revolution will happen and must happen for India to for the Indian growth story to continue. I think that emphasis, which he has not spelled out in any detail, but that mention, I think, is rather important.
Right, we've just got 10 more minutes on the debate, so I want to cover 2-3 issues before we get closing comments from all panelists. Vinayak Chatterjee, one slogan that he did coin this time around was Start Up India, Stand Up India. Does that give you an indication that this is going to be the next policy thrust of this government, and what can it really do?
It does indeed, and it's an important point you raised. For the Prime Minister to touch upon this very important point of grassroots entrepreneurial activity, and that too focused on certain strata of society that have historically been, not privileged enough, is a pointer to what I think things are going to come. He's already asked each location of each branch of every bank to select 1 or 2 local entrepreneurs and help support their ventures, and thereby look at job creation. It's a very interesting middle path which steers clear between asking corporate India to clear jobs or asking public sector behemoths to clear jobs, and takes an interesting path that I do not think many prime ministers have articulated their vision in this in this manner previously by saying, what is it that we can do today to reach out to the smallest towns and cities in India and provide an ecosystem, whether it is through bank finance or other facilitative measures, to create a generation of entrepreneurs who would then be the engines of job creation rather than depending on the traditional sectors. It's a very, very important point, and if you ask me, I would certainly put my money on expecting this scheme to unfold further with many more supporting schemes around this theme. And now that you asked this question, let me also say that one of the things I liked about the speech today was that it was completely free of populism. No giveaways, no massive loan melas, waivers, write-offs, gifts. At the same time, not a single announcement of a new scheme. In the past Independence Day speeches, we had paragraphs after paragraphs of very highfalutin names after famous leaders of this country, and most of the people who heard the speech, by the time the speech finished, would not even remember what that scheme was called, or people would have forgotten what it was supposed to deliver. So no populism, no announcement of new schemes, and certainly touching on achievements on some of the schemes that were already announced. So coming back to your point, supporting entrepreneurial activity at the grassroots level, to me, seems to be an interesting new movement taking shape within the corridors of power and to be unleashed on India with this new slogan, Start Up India, Stand Up India. It's a good move. It's a very, very positive move.
You know, Gurcharan Das, I think these are the 2 points that I'll tend to, compliment the speech on. One, the fact that it was absolutely zero populism, which is what you'd expect from the speech, contrary to what we've seen over the last few years. And you highlighted that point as well. And of course, he struck the right chord with the startup. One doesn't expect him to roll out the policy fine print here. I'm sure that'll get done over the next few weeks. But that's an important area. And one gets the feeling that the government wants to have an enabling policy environment for the startup community.
Absolutely right, and I agree with what Mr. Chatterjee has just said entirely. What he missed one opportunity. A startup needs it needs finance, capital. So if he can force the bank branches, NBFCs, create some kind of incentive to give money, to give loans to startups. The second thing the startup suffers from is the Inspector Raj. It is the whole problem of ease of doing business. It is the red tape and corruption at the bottom level that exists pervasively. I wish that when his talk about corruption, he would have reminded us, what is the government doing? How is it incentivizing the states to remove Inspector Raj? Now they are doing something, because we've got a target to reach a 50 rank from 142. Even if we don't get from 142, even if we get to 100, I think that would be a great achievement. But it's the specific efforts that how you can, and some states have really got, Chandrababu Naidu in Andhra Pradesh has done some really fine things that Amitabh Kant was telling me about. And similarly, Maharashtra. It's not a surprise that they've got Foxconn and others, because Maharashtra is doing a lot as well to ease the doing business. Now, he doesn't have to mention states, but he needs to talk again about the importance of getting rid of the red tape that is the enemy of the startup in India today.
To move focus slightly away from business, Dilip, Padgaonkar, a point that you flagged off at the start of your comments, one rank, one pension, a hugely controversial issue now that there's a heated debate. Are you happy to see that there was no grandstanding by the Prime Minister in his address on this contentious issue of one rank, one pension?
Absolutely. I think his position was a wise position. This is a complicated issue. He is very clear the government has accepted the principle of one rank, one pension. But there are a huge number of complexities involved, and therefore the government needs time to sort them out. I am sure that sooner than later this will happen. But I think that single sentence in the speech was the right thing to say, because there is, as you know, a tremendous amount of pressure which is being building up with the protest at Jantar Mantar. I think the Prime Minister took what I feel is a correct position, a wise position, and some patience is required, because the government has said it agrees with the need for an one rank, one pension scheme. So that on that score, I have absolutely no problems. But since still I have the floor, I just want to tell you, how delighted I was to hear about this grassroots entrepreneurship, because it went hand in hand with the image that he portrayed in the speech, which is that of the pyramid. That once you strengthen the base of the pyramid with millions and millions of entrepreneurs right there in the villages, at the taluka level, at the district level, I think it becomes a different model of development for India. And if you were to ask me, probably this is the one thing that the Prime Minister said which has excited me the most.
Right. Dr. Rajiv Kumar, on the issue of one rank, one pension, do you agree with Dilip Padgaonkar's view that there was no grandstanding, which is good, or are you disappointed that this issue has still not been sorted out?
Well, I wish that he had got his officials and everybody else to sort it out by now. You don't take a year and longer for any issue, and also I think that if there wasn't things happening, he would have been better off announcing them midway, 4 months earlier, because at this point of time he has had to take it on his chin. He has simply said that basically he has said mea culpa, that I agree in principle, but I have not been able to deliver it, so please believe me, I will. But I don't think after 25 years and after 18 months of his having promised it, he did that in the first rally in Haryana. People, the service people are willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. So that is where I think you will see some raised passions, and you will see problems happening. And the sooner he can get the MOD to sort, MOD plus the Finance Ministry, I suppose, to sort this one out, the better off we will be and he will be.
Well, yes, that is an issue that needs to be fixed. Running out of time, let me get quick closing comments from all our panelists. I'll let Dilip Padgaonkar have the last word and let him rate the speech. But I'll start with you, Vinayak Chatterjee. All in all, what's your sense of this Independence Day speech? How does this compare to his first one? Because he set the benchmark with his first speech, which in a sense set the bedrock for this government's policy making, like we said at the start of this program. How would you, view this speech?
It is not fair to evaluate this speech with the first one. The first one was a maiden speech. It was a breakthrough speech on assuming power. And this one is after 15 months in power. So as I said during your program, if you ask me that of the 100 buttons that a Prime Minister can choose to press on an Independence Day speech from the ramparts to the Red Fort, he chooses a few and he chooses not to speak about a few. And if you ask me, I'm going to repeat the point I made earlier. In today's morning's speech, did he connect well with the people of India? I would give a resounding yes. And if you agree with me, then I would say that it was certainly a speech well made and it was a successful speech because he connected, I would believe, with every Indian who listened to him. And I rest my case here.
All right, that's a strong argument that you've made. But Sidharth Birla, what's your sense? Do you think he can, like Vinayak Chatterjee pointed out, do you think he's connected with all constituents, with industry, with the farmer, with the common man, with the startup entrepreneur? Do you think it's a speech that touched all these chords?
Yes, I think he, as I said before, he had his purpose laid out, and therefore he selected what he would speak about and what he would not. And what he spoke about, I think he would have connected with all his constituencies. When we compare it to, say, last year's speech, again, last year's speech was visionary, and this one had to be realistic and on the ground, and talking more on the ground. Because if he, again, we raised the bar with another visionary speech, then that would have its own reactions in the sense that we are only talking about new vision and very little action. So I think from here on, we can look to 2 to 3 years of hard, reality-based Independence Day speeches.
Gurcharan Das, I know you've articulately you've articulated your point of view on this particular speech, but if you were to look at the big picture, do you think, in a sense, he's missed out on a few critical elements that if he had, it would have been just about a perfect speech, like probably his last year's address was?
Yeah, well, look, on the whole, I think this was a terrific job. And the most important thing is that he resisted the temptation to announce lots of new schemes, which every Prime Minister has done in recent history, and instead chose to give us a report card. Now, of course, it was a selective report card, and that's understandable. And it's good. I mean, the people were heartened by some of the achievements that we have made. The achievements on financial inclusion, the achievements of turning the country from a subsidy Raj to direct transfers, with the LPG being the first example of that, and going towards the jam approach is absolutely the right approach. He focused on auctions, which is also another achievement of this government. So on the whole, I would say he connected with people. He focused on the right things. Now my only hope is, as going forward, we'll have more focus on implementation, and his giving us the roadmap of implementation each time he speaks. He lays out a new scheme. Let's get a much clearer roadmap for all the wonderful schemes that he has announced so far.
Roadmap for implementation, that's the key. I couldn't agree more with you, Dr. Rajiv Kumar. You know, one criticism of this government has been on execution, on implementation. You know, policy intent is there and everyone broadly is in sync with that vision, but execution seems to be weak when you look at Make in India, Digital India, all these plans, we still don't have an implementation roadmap. Do you agree with this criticism, or are you also getting a little impatient, or do you think we should give this government more time?
Well, no, I actually don't agree with that at all, because I think that if there is one strong suit that Mr. Modi has, it is his delivery, it is his execution, it is his eye on detail. He's like a projects man, you know, and he converts a lot of things into time-bound projects. And you know, in the Jan Dhan Yojana and the insurance schemes and the LPG schemes, etc., are all sort of you know, examples of that. Now, what the sort of thing that you mentioned, I think he underestimated the kind of preparation that is needed to get those things off the ground. You know, these Make in India, for example, I know, because I've been you know, following it up. I've been talking to the very senior minister officials there. You know, it's an interministerial coordination. It's an intergovernmental coordination. They are trying to draw up a list of something like 90 variables on which you know, they will judge the states, or you know, whether there is progress or not. So you know, I don't think, you know, I think please remember that he emphasized a change in work culture, and the fact that this government was there working hard, and I've actually seen that. So while I agree that the delivery on certain aspects, like especially like key aspects like Make in India and Digital India and the OROP has not been satisfactory, my take is that they deserve the benefit of the doubt, and because I've just written recently that there are certain green shoots of recovery already, I think it's not yet time to be impatient at all.
Not time to be impatient at all. Dilip, Padgaonkar, I'll let you have the last word on the speech. What's your rating?
Well, I would have rated the speech much higher had the Prime Minister also spent. I mean, I'm sure that, you know, there are several buttons that we want him to press, but there is at least one button which he ought to have pressed and which he didn't, which is about foreign policy and the security environment. I think everything that you do internally is dependent very heavily on the kind of environment you have around the country. The fact is that on the foreign policy front, the Modi government has had extraordinary victories, extraordinary various kinds of things that have been achieved on that front. He didn't say a word about it. The security environment is getting worse by the week, particularly with what's happening in the neighborhood. The fact that he didn't mention that, and to say that he only spoke those things which appeal to the common Indian, I think is not really a good reflection on the intelligence of the average Indian. They would have really liked to know whether we are going to make economic progress, whether we're going to have social stability at a time when the security environment around us is getting more and more difficult by the week. Overall, however, I would say the absence of populism, the fact that he's given a fairly balanced report card on the various schemes that he's launched, I think that certainly merits good praise.
Would you rate it at 6 on 10?
5.5.
5.5 on 10. That's the journalist's view. I'm sure the corporates on the panel will be far more generous. Out of time then, and this edition of our special telecast on the Prime Minister's Independence Day speech. Like all our panelists pointed out, good to see no populism, good to see some good intent as well. Of course, it's now time for execution as well. Thanks for watching this special telecast on ET Now. And thanks so much to our panelists for joining us.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.